This has been a long and often lonely fight in the Senate. The big money right-wing apparatus has tried over and over to shut me up. I think I may have a record for hostile Wall Street Journal editorials. And may I tell the Wall Street Journal editorial board, thank you, that is a badge of honor. They invented, out of thin air, the idea that former presidents are absolutely immune from being held accountable for using their office to break the law, to commit crimes, even to commit treason. On top of all this, the court has done its best to prevent the American people from fighting back through the democratic process. It's made it harder for ordinary people to vote, while making it easier for billionaires and deep-pocketed special interests to impose their will on the American people with unlimited amounts of dark money. How did we get here? A decades-long scheme led by creepy billionaires and backed by a deluge of dark money captured the court like some crooked 19th century railroad commission. This court capture operation was not cheap. The latest estimate put it at more than $580 million, and that's a minimum. That money flowed in from creepy billionaires, laundered through right-wing front groups like the Federalist Society and Judicial Crisis Network, where the donors, the real donors, could hide their identities behind the front groups doing their dirty work. This dark money funded full-scale campaigns to stack the Supreme Court with justices who would deliver for the billionaires.
Rhode Island Senator Sheldon Whitehouse has been one of the most consistent voices sounding the alarm and calling out the conservative Supreme Court justices for the corrupt sellouts that they are and the billionaires who have enabled said corruption.
Dark money is the rot in our democracy right now. It is controlled by definition by billionaires and wealthy special interests who have the ability to spend millions and millions of dollars in politics, the motive to spend millions and millions of dollars in politics, and the desire to obscure from the public who they are when they spend it, so they can't be held accountable for their political intervention into our democracy. This is the court that dark money built. And it built it through contributions to the Republican Party. It built it through front groups that were stood up that don't reveal who their real funding is, but that then go out and lobby for issues, file amicus briefs for issues, in many cases litigate cases as the real party in interest. They'll go and find a plaintiff of convenience to be the nominal plaintiff, but as those of us who are lawyers know, usually the client goes to find the lawyer. When you've got cases in which the lawyer has gone to find a client in order to bring a case, that's a little bit of a red flag. So it comes throughout this whole scheme effort.
We all know that money talks and dictates the direction our entire political system takes at any given moment in time. But the fact that the Supreme Court justices have no binding code of ethics to follow, almost no mechanisms to enforce ethics violations, and are given lifetime appointments has turned the court, and by extension, the entire legal system, into a pay-to-play scheme for wealthy donors to bypass electoral politics and ram their agenda through the courts, or more accurately, undemocratically, without the consent of voters and their voices being heard. But you're smart enough to know that the rich and powerful play by an entirely different set of rules.
Once these hand-picked nominees landed on the court, the dark money network tells them how to rule, supplying them with extremist legal arguments through so-called friend of the court briefs designed to reach their desired results. And the parallel between what the friend of the court brief flotillas recommend and what the FedSoc justices do is nearly perfect. Leo and his cronies also orchestrated a secret gifts program for their amenable justices, keeping them happy with lavish gifts of luxury vacations and other high-value freebies. And then it adopted a toothless ethics code with no mechanism for either investigation or determination or enforcement. The Supreme Court now stands alone in all of government, free from any fact-finding about ethical misconduct. As a result, the court's legitimacy in the eyes of the American people is now at an all-time low and falling.
That's been the goal all along. Pack the Supreme Court, federal courts, and state-level courts with billionaire-friendly conservative judges willing to do the bidding of their sugar daddies, regardless of the disastrous effects it has on the lives on everyday American people. Whitehouse has certainly made a name for himself exposing the corruption of the conservative justices on the court, which brings us to this.
The White House has authorized the FBI to expand its limited background investigation into sexual misconduct allegations against Brett Kavanaugh, giving the FBI the green light to interview anyone it deems necessary, as long as the review is wrapped up by the end of the week.
I think the FBI should interview anybody that they want within reason. But you have to say within reason. They should interview, but they should also be guided, and I'm being guided, by what the senators are looking for.
Back in 2018, Donald Trump's administration was supposed to give the FBI free rein to investigate claims of sexual misconduct against Justice Brett Kavanaugh. And almost exactly 4 years later, in 2022,
we wanted to make sure that the White House had all the information we have. So when the hundreds of calls started coming in, we gathered those up, reviewed them, and provided them to the White House.
Without investigation?
We reviewed them and then provided them to
You
the
reviewed
White
them for purposes of separating from tip line traffic, but did not further investigate the ones that related to Kavanaugh, correct?
House. Correct.
Is it also true that in that supplemental BI, the FBI took direction from the White House as to whom the FBI would question and even what questions the FBI could ask?
In a limited supplemental BI, we take direction from the requesting entity, which in this case was the White House, as to what follow-up they want. And that's the direction we followed. That's the direction we've consistently followed throughout the decades, frankly. You asked specifically about who and what, like who we...
I said, is it true?
It is true as to the who,
Yep.
to the who. I'm not sure, as I sit here, whether it's also true as to the what questions, but it is true as to the who we interviewed.
This is like last call at the Factual Correction Saloon with respect to the Kavanaugh supplemental BI.
White House again tried to get answers from FBI Director Christopher Wray about the background investigation into Kavanaugh, leaving frustrated at the lack of transparency. Now, just weeks ago.
And the best that the court packers can come up with is, well, there's nothing new there, and, oh, the timing is so suspicious. Well, as to nothing new there, what's new is the White House had total control over every aspect of the investigation. The FBI had no ground rules whatsoever to follow regarding supplemental background investigations. The tip line was a complete sham with no tip ever investigated, and they were told specifically not to get corroborating evidence when the Republicans all then went and said, oh, but there's no corroboration. So if the Republicans knew all that, shame on them. And as to the timing, Trump blocked me for 2 years of absolute stonewalling.
This week's report found that the Trump White House exercised total control over the investigation, including preventing the FBI from following up on numerous leads and blocking interviews with key witnesses. The Trump administration also allegedly instructed the FBI not to use its tip line, instead forwarding tips that were intended for law enforcement directly to the White House.
So this was done under the rules for a supplemental background investigation, which both the White House and the Department of Justice and the FBI declined to inform the American people meant there are no rules. The White House makes every decision.
You know, it's not surprising that the Trump administration did this, but it's still very alarming and dangerous that they participated in a sham investigation into very serious claims about or against Brett Kavanaugh. We're talking about sexual misconduct claims, okay? And so when you take advantage and you abuse your power with this investigation over something very serious, regardless of political affiliation, that sets a terrible precedent. And it means a lot of people can get away with so many terrible things that are going to eventually, that have a lot of effect on other people, you know? So it's, to me, there's a bigger discussion here, right, about how crooked our politics are and how much money influences politics. It just incentivizes the corruption that we see. So we really have to take a step back and evaluate, are we actually doing what is best for the American people? And the answer obviously is no, we're not. Because you see how the world works, or you see how the political system works, and what gets rewarded and what gets penalized. Okay? If you don't have the money, you're usually not going to be able to succeed. And that's a shame. That's a shame in our country. Because a lot of the people who have a lot of money, they're the ones carrying out so much harm and chaos, such as, you know, the Supreme Court justices and their billionaire friends. For LHQ, I'm Chris Williamson. We'll see you next time.